Hello and welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I am Brandon Tessers. This is Bianca
Sibishan.
Sibishan. Uh, we are both licensed therapists, but this is not therapy for very, very many reasons. Bianca is a licensed therapist in Romania, her home country. Here in the United States, she's a coach, but that same training and licensure background. And this is still not therapy, no matter what.
No matter what.
This is just an open conversation between Bianca and I and all of you. I'm going to adjust the view here real quick just to make it a little easier for us to see. There we go. We're going to be talking about whatever we're talking about, and we're doing our best to take into consideration who you all are. We're making our guesses about who you might be, whether you're watching this live or watching this after the fact on YouTube or wherever. We're making our guesses about what you're interested in, how we're coming across to you, how we're impacting you. For those of you who are willing and able to participate in the chat, we appreciate that because it gives us a lot more information on which to base those guesses about who you are and what you're interested in and how we're impacting you. But we will start by just talking about whatever we're talking about. And please don't hesitate to jump in at any point. Don't worry about whether what you're wanting to say is on topic. Ask questions if you have them, make jokes if you want, say hello, whatever. We'll go wherever. We're here. Bianca and I, fortunately, get a lot of opportunities to talk with one another. So the point of this is that we're here to be able to talk with you, and we'd rather go where you're interested in going. Plus, the whole idea of like keeping on topic is, I would say, not for real, but maybe it's a weird way to phrase that. We work with a small therapy and coaching practice called Effective Artistry. Our office is located in Northbrook, Illinois. We do individual, couples, family, and group therapy with people in the state of Illinois and the state of Wisconsin. We also work with a few coaches like Bianca here who do executive functioning coaching with people all over the world via the internet. They are all trained and do executive functioning coaching, but they all have additional specialties on top of that. Bianca has a lot of background and experience working with parents and families, a lot of parenting coaching work. We also have people who do creativity and artistry coaching and business and professional coaching. If you're interested in any of that, our website is effectiveartistry.com. I'm sure there's links and stuff attached to what we're doing. I hope and assume anyway that there are.
If not, we should make sure they are.
I know there we set it all up, but it's been a long time since I've checked to see. I'm assuming it's all still there, but what else? We will do our best to read out comments as they come in because we are streaming on 3 different platforms simultaneously. And each of you will only see chat comments that were entered. You know, if you're on Facebook, you see Facebook comments and not the others. So we try to read them out so that everybody is on the same page. That's one of the very many reasons this is not therapy. This is live and public on the internet and open to everybody. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
There's a comment there already. There's a rumor going around that you can help with the sense of time flying by faster and faster. Interesting. That's from Coach Fritz, who is one of the coaches that works with us, and also my father. I'm feeling unresolved, like there's something I forgot to say, but I don't think so. That's the basic.
I think we went through. Yeah.
Okay. Well, how are you? What's on your mind?
Oh, structures. I don't know why today this is
structures.
That's the term that keeps stepping to my mind. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. We have a question there about the sense of time flying by. These two things go together a lot. I'll start off in a very what I think of as a stereotypical Brandon way. Like it's going to match what people are like. This sounds like what Brandon would say.
Okay.
But it is interesting, and it helps to set the groundwork for the conversation. That in ancient Greek, there were 2 different words to refer to the passage of time.
Okay.
One of which was for talking about the passage of time as we mostly talk about it today. That word's chronos. It's the root of chronological or chronometer. That's still a root word we use to refer to time. That's a second lasts a second and an hour lasts an hour, whatever. And then there was another word, kairos, I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong, but Kairos, which was to describe the subjective experience of time passing, kind of like what you're referring to there, Coach Fritz, where sometimes a minute feels like an hour and sometimes an hour feels like it didn't happen at all. Right? We still have a very common saying of time flies when you're having fun.
Mhm.
But we also have all different kinds of words, phrases, language to talk about the fact that we're all aware of time subjectively passing differently. Sometimes it says like everything's slowed down, sometimes it thinks like everything's sped. So what the hell is going on with that is an interesting question. And it does play into structure and routine because a lot of this is about attention. So I'll do a brief, because we've talked about it a bunch, but just like kind of a brief refresher about when we're talking about attention, we're talking about processes that dictate what things pass into awareness. So think of it as attention is like a pipe, and then awareness is like a reservoir, right? That things go through the pipe to get into the reservoir. They might stay there, they might go out, you might use them while they're in there, whatever. That's a separate process. Attention is just what goes in. And like a pipe, it doesn't, the available room space to take things in doesn't change moment to moment,
Okay.
right? You're noticing the same amount of stuff in any given moment. But some of that stuff, like we said, some of that comes in and it's used and gone immediately. It's not stored. And that can happen so quickly that you don't even notice that you noticed it.
Mhm.
We only have to use logic to deduce that, like, when I drove home, I obviously must have taken into, like, I noticed traffic signals and where other cars were around me, because if I didn't, bad things would have happened. So I must have. But I don't like remember having noticed that. I didn't have any experience of like noticing it beyond just the moment in which I used it and it's gone. So that experience seems very different to us, including that we'll often think of it as like, I didn't pay attention at all.
Mhm.
So what things we're paying attention to and what things are in our awareness, how long they stay there, how much is used, impacts a lot about how we perceive things. Since Kairos makes me feel like it will be Christmas Eve next Friday. So Kairos, if I'm understanding this correctly, is not a sense. It's just talking about the concept of, think of it as like Chronos is kind of like saying space and Kairos is kind of like saying movement.
Okay.
Like it's referencing the way in which you pass through time, not any ideas you have about time, but just the subjective experience you have of, because time is not a resource, it's a dimension. It's something through which we move. It's a fascinating one, obviously. Super weird. It's different than physical, the three physical dimensions in certain ways, but it's still that. We don't talk about it like that.
No,
That's where
yeah.
this routine stuff
Most
comes
of the
in.
people are talking about as being a resource, and
Right.
that's where the problems come
I
in.
mean, we literally would talk about like bad at time management or whatever.
Mhm.
The thing is that a resource is something that you have a stockpile, you have some amount of that resource, and then it is spent in pursuit of whatever. You use it on something. And what makes it a resource is that in using it on that, every element of that you used, you can't use it for anything else.
Mhm.
So like if I spend $1 on a candy bar, I might have other dollars that I can spend on other things, but that dollar that was spent on that candy bar is gone. I traded that dollar for that candy bar. That's what makes something a resource. You use it up, you accrue it, however, they're different things. But
Mhm.
time is not that, even though people think that it is. Um, if I were to say, like, I spent an hour playing video games,
Mhm.
right? This is going to sound ridiculous, but also during that hour, my heart was beating and I was breathing. And that's the silly autonomic stuff. I get it. But it does prove that I can do more than one thing at a time. Even if I'm not looking at those autonomic things, I can say, like, while playing that video game, I also was having a conversation with my friend that I was hanging out with and playing with, or whatever.
Mhm.
Whether we think of what we're doing as being only one thing or multiple things, because I could say, nope, I literally did nothing that wasn't playing the video game. But even in that video game, I could break it down to like, well, I'm moving around, I'm checking my, information and what I'm supposed to do next or whatever.
Mhm.
That's a matter of perception. What people are actually talking about when they're talking about time management is behavior management. What am I getting myself to do when and for how long? So the resource that we're actually discussing there, the limitation is physicality.
Okay.
Time is not a resource. The simple way to say that is, can you save it up? Can you make a decision about, I'm going to spend my time fast, I'm going to spend a bunch of it all at once in order to accomplish this thing, and then I'll be low on it for a while. No, but physicality is. So what we all know is like, I can't be here and there at the same time. So there are limits on how many or what types of things I can do in the same moment. But those limits are not because of time. Those limits are because of I am finite. I can only reach so many. I have two hands, right? So I can say I can only hold two things at a time. But if I had three hands, I could hold three things at a time. So the time is not the limiting factor.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's not worth talking about that way. I usually reference it that way because we're not usually talking about the nature of time and how we perceive it. So it's not usually relevant. But to be clear, the reason we talk about it that way, this is my theories or whatever, but I think this is pretty standard or pretty uncontroversial. My tea is not cool enough for me to drink yet. My mouth is super dry, so I need to drink something. Is because it is easy to discuss. It's easy to conceptualize. We have at this point, there's some interesting stuff about if you go back in time, how difficult it becomes. But right now, pretty much no matter where I am, I have access to a clock that in very specific and precise terms tells me about time in not necessarily universal, but pretty much universal ways, right? Like I can look at my phone and see that it is 5:15 and everybody else in the world, right? It's not 5:15 where they are, but it's the same. If they're in a time zone that's 5 hours different, it's 10:15 for them or whatever. I can talk to you and say, hey, I'll be there in 15 minutes and have every confidence that you know what I mean by 15 minutes.
Yes.
You might not believe me,
Yeah,
like, he's going to take longer. But we can communicate about it. Whereas, let's take energy, which is another resource. If I were to say like, oh, that task is going to take me 20 points of energy, you have no idea what that means. So there's two things. A, I don't know what the hell I mean unless I put specific work into it. We teach, if you have young children, you know that like we teach kids how to read clocks, like analog clocks, as part of like kindergarten curriculum. Started from the age of 5. The teacher is constantly referencing like at 10:45 we're going to go to gym or whatever. We teach everybody how to be aware of that time, and it's all in language that is we then internalize. I now can track time easily, and I can communicate to other people about it. Whereas something like energy or attention or awareness is much more difficult. I don't even know like how much of my attention is that taking. I can just know it's some or more or less, or maybe even like a lot or all. That's about as precise as I can get. And again, if I'm trying to project, when I do this thing in the future, well, easy for me to reference. I've done a lot of things like that, and I know how long they took me roughly because I notice time really easily. So when I project, I'm going to go the same way on time. How much energy do they take me? I don't know. It's not something I pay attention to. I don't have language. So one of the things I do a lot is teach people language to start to track energy or attention or awareness, because your planning will get a lot better. No one, for example, would say, hey, you're trying to buy a house. The most important thing is that you look at your calendar and set aside time to do that. Like, there are other resources which are more relevant. So if I just say like 7 o'clock tonight, I'm going to do it, and then I go to do it, but I don't have the money to do it, I don't do it. In that case, obviously in the metaphor, I don't walk away being like, I'm confused. Why didn't I do that?
Exactly.
But in real life, all the time, people are like, I'm going to do it at this time. They go to do it. They don't. And they're like, why? Because there are other things, just resources, tools as well, that are necessary in order to do things. Back to time. Something that is often talked about, especially in correlation with ADHD, but neurodivergence more broadly, is what people will often call time blindness. Some people have started advocating for the term time agnosia instead, so as to avoid using blindness, which is a term related to an actual like physical disability.
Okay.
but just a lack of awareness of time or a poor awareness of time. But here's the thing. To notice anything means that it's coming in through attention, right?
Yes.
Right now in this moment, you, me, whatever you all are doing, if we pause and do like a mindfulness exercise of like close your eyes and listen to all the sounds that you hear, you'll notice sounds that you weren't noticing before you started that.
Right.
That data was already there. Like the sound waves were already reaching your eardrums, but you just didn't notice it. So that's attention. It's sensation is, do my sensory organs pick up on the data? Perception then is processing that data and becoming aware of it. We don't actually have an internal sense of time intellectually. Meaning, if you took a person and took them away, we've done this, right? Take them away from all external markers of time. No clocks, no sunlight going up, going down, whatever. Nothing to reference as a way to like gauge the passage of time. Then their sense of time gets all disconnected pretty quickly. This is one of the, if you've ever heard the term circadian rhythm, that concept, that's what these experiments are producing, is what we find if we do that, is that people actually inherently work on a 25-hour cycle. So they quickly get off of the real world time. In other words, back to, we're talking about processes, we're going to connect this to like habits and routines and stuff. So I might think of myself as like, I get tired at 11 o'clock every night. But if you took me away from all external markers of time, I would think I'm still getting tired at 11 o'clock every night, because that's what I do. I get tired at, but I'd actually be getting tired at 11, and then at midnight, and then at 1 a.m., and then at 2, even if it stayed like relatively regular.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
25-hour circadian rhythm. I've never read about this or thought about this before, but I would bet there's people out there theorizing about like that's why we always feel tired and overwhelmed and stuff, is because our internal systems are built on having an extra hour.
We need that. I want it. I don't know who took it, but I want it back.
So if we're noting the passage of time, it's based on noting markers of time passing. Now, we do have internal markers of time passing, but those markers are not steady. A clock ticks 1 second every second. Internally, even if you take me away from everything, I still know time is passing because my hunger increases, my tiredness increases, my need to use the bathroom increases over time, right? Also, my heart beats. And even if I'm not paying very close attention to that, that is data of which I'm aware. Right? People don't typically do this, and so aren't aware of being able to do it, but you absolutely can if you learn to pay attention to the right things. You can just stop and pay attention and notice your heartbeat and just track it without having to like take your pulse or whatever. Even in little ways, like your eyelids get slightly bigger every time the blood is pumped in, so your vision's changing in little ways, you know. A lot of people have the experience of, you know, you lay down and you look down and you can see your skin like move every time your heart beats. So here's some theories, is that what we're actually doing when we notice the passage of time is we're tracking our own heartbeat, and on a very low, like we're not paying a lot of attention to it. It's not taking much of our cognitive resources, but on a very low level that plays into our sense of how much time has passed, how much time is passing.
Okay.
We look at things like when you are stressed or anxious or whatever, your heartbeat speeds up. Also, during those instances, you feel as though you are running out of time. Like you're the more behind, we usually connect it the other way. The more you feel like you're behind on things and overwhelmed, you can't get to everything, the more stressed you get. But it's entirely plausible that the more stressed you get, the more you start to think and act and feel as though you are running out of time. That idea of time moving by faster and faster. This wouldn't be the only reason that would happen, but this is one possibility. So one possible factor playing into our perception of time is literally just like the conditions of our body. Are we amped up or are we relaxed? The more we're relaxed, the slower things feel like they're going. The more we're amped up, the faster they seem like they're going. Back to other markers, not only external, there is time, or there is that clock, there is the sun going up and down, there, whatever. The more I'm aware of the clock, the more I'm aware of the passage of time. We literally call it clock watching, right? That when you're like waiting for the moment to pass, watching that clock makes it seem like it goes so much slower. That, in theory, is just increased awareness of the passage of time. I'm paying very close attention to time passing, whereas at other times, especially like when I'm having fun, I'm not paying attention to time passing. And so then all of a sudden it's like, whoa. So one thing that makes time feel like it's going faster and faster is that you're not paying attention to the passage of time, meaning you are paying a lot of attention to whatever it is you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if that's enjoyable, because it's taking a lot of your attention without amping you up and getting you like nervous and stressed. Where more likely, if you're paying close attention to a task, but you're also very stressed, you're probably still thinking about time because you're like, oh shit, I got to get this done,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a ramped up perception of time. Does this
That
make
makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. But I would like to go back to what you were saying and how the importance of helping people understand that this is not a resource and that there's other resources that implies, because yeah, most especially divergent people struggle a lot with this concept of I'm not managing my time right. And I would like you to go more into the fact and into the explain the other resources that are extremely important and
Yeah.
they are affecting.
So to do anything, whatever we're talking about is like, I'm going to do this or whatever. To do anything requires things which are specific to that thing, right? Like in order to paint, I have to have a lot of stuff, but some of what I have to have is like the paintbrush in front of me or in my hand and the paint and the canvas or whatever, right? So we could say in order to paint, you need to have the supplies to paint. That doesn't mean that's the only thing you need.
Correct.
There's other things too. And what we're tending to look for, what humans want to look for, is like, what's the most generic thing? What is the thing that if I figure it out, it can be spent in the most ways? Part of like the utility of money, as an example, which results in our focus on money, is that it is very widely applicable. There's so many different tasks that having money, you can use that money to apply towards accomplishing that task.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to paint, you can use money to get the paint supplies, right? So of course, we're then incentivized to look for like, what's the thing that if I get more of this thing, I can do anything I want, as opposed to like this thing, in order to clean my kitchen, I have to like pick up this dish and move it to the counter. That doesn't help me with like, how do I get myself to do my homework, or how do I get myself to submit my taxes or whatever.
Okay.
So we're looking for things that apply to as many different situations as possible. That pulls us towards overarching concepts. One of the reasons we focus on time so much is because we are aware that doing anything, time passes from starting doing it to finishing doing it. So if we figure out time, I mean, we could use that on anything. I don't know that I've ever met a person who didn't say like, I wish I had more time.
That hour, that extra hour.
So what we want to do is get specific to the task.
Okay.
Whatever it is you're trying to do, there are specific things necessary to do that. So I categorize resources in 3 groups. The first are what I call universal resources, which are, there's 4 things in this category, 2 of which are required for literally anything you ever do. The other 2 are required for literally anything you ever do that involves conscious awareness of any kind.
Okay.
So the first 2 is energy. Even things that you're not aware of doing, that still requires energy. My heart beating still requires energy. And the other is physicality. But for the most part, we're going to call that time. In this conversation, I'm going to try and be clear about it. But in regular conversations, I'm going to refer to it as time, because trying to clarify the difference is just not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
That anything I do involves the use of my body in some way, shape, or form. And my body has limitations on what I can do, but anything I do uses it to some extent, even things I'm not aware of, right? My heart beating not only requires the energy to activate the system, it requires the system itself. The heart has to be there. The nerves that communicate from the nervous system to the heart to send those muscles the electrical signals that make them contract and expand and whatever. So the system has to exist, and then the energy, the catalyst, the fuel source is used up.
Okay.
Then there's the two resources that are used for everything I'm aware of, one of which we talked about, what we both talked about, both attention and awareness. Attention is the doorway that information has to pass through for me to become aware of it. Once something is in awareness, we use the metaphor of talking about that as space, working memory, consciousness, whatever. Only so much can fit in there, meaning I can only be conscious of so many things at one time. So that's a resource. Using it on this means that I can't use it on anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two things that are universal. Even something like noticing a traffic light or walking down the street and not bumping into somebody, it took some attention and some awareness, but these things take such little that we don't even really notice them.
Mm-hmm.
Where other things don't even take that. Heart beating takes no attention or awareness. We can get attention and awareness involved in breathing and stuff, but it mostly happens without any of that. Digestion, your cells multiplying or whatever, like these don't require attention and awareness. Then, so that's the universe, what I call the universe resources. Then there's what I call common resources, which is just two, it's money and social capital. That those two resources they're not involved in every single thing that we do,
Mm-hmm.
but they can be used for like so many things.
What do you mean when you say social capital?
Social capital is a way of conceptualizing getting other people to do something for you.
Okay.
Obviously, one of the ways that we get other people to do something for us is by giving them money.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other ways we get people to do something for us. Think of it as like calling in a favor. It's just a way of kind of encapsulating. It's too tricky to talk about like all the relationships that I have and to what extent people might be willing to, help me out with something that I've asked or what I've done that would earn that they would do that in response, or how they look up at me or want something from me or.
Got it.
So money is one way we can get other people to do things. I think the most useful way to think of money, I've heard it described this way, is think of it as an artifact that encapsulates human energy. That like I get money in response theoretically to something that like I spent energy on or somebody else spent energy on. And whatever I'm doing with that money, it's getting me the result of something that other people spent energy on.
Okay.
Obviously there are like so much morality and like values in our culture that get put onto money that it can be hard for people to view it through that kind of a neutral lens. People think of money as being, money is the root of all evil and all this stuff, which by the way is not the original phrase. It's the love of money is the root of all evil is the original phrase. But it's just a tool and it's a really, really useful one, right? Like if we specialize, which is good for us. It's useful for us as humans that like I focus on doing therapy and all this stuff. Somebody else focuses on growing food. And when I need food, I can get it from them. And when they need therapy, they can get it from me. That started with like barter systems. Well, it started with relationships. There's only so many of us and we just do things with and for each other and we navigate it in that social way. We still do that, obviously. Then as societies scale up a little more and it's like, I don't even have relationships with people, don't know them. Then it switches into bartering. Like I'll give you a goat if you build me a shed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That just becomes very tricky as you scale up even further. Like, I benefit from the work that someone does to develop a new medical treatment for something that I'm experiencing. Like, how do I give them a goat for that? And how do we exactly figure out the exchange rate of goats to whatever? So as society gets more complex, we need a stand-in, and that's what that's what money is. As far as I'm aware, money mostly originated as mostly comes from taxes. The tax collectors need to come around but we don't want to carry 1 billion chickens back to the capital. So we just need little markers that represent that you keep the chicken, but we own one of them.
Mhm.
They're like little chits and markers that then get more abstract. So anyway, money and social capital both represent the same thing: the ability to get other people to do stuff or to benefit from the labor of other people.
Okay.
Social capital just encompasses all ways in which you do that that isn't money.
Mhm.
Again, also a resource. If I call in a favor on this thing, I can't use that same favor on another thing. Favor is an abstract way of just saying you have some willingness and ability to do something on my behalf, but it's limited. Even with whatever exceptions, pure love and whatever, your parents and children, whatever, there are limitations. I'll do this for you, I'll do this for you, and then we hit too many requests in too short of a period, and it's like, no, no more.
Correct.
A lot of what people get concerned about when they're talking about things like people pleasing behavior and stuff, through this lens, is the same thing as like trying to accrue a lot of money. There's nothing wrong. In fact, it's quite important to earn enough money to be able to do the things that you're wanting to do or trying to do. But there does happen to be a problem when somebody shifts into just wanting money for its own sake and they don't ever then go use it. They have no intention of using it. Mostly what's happening there is people are using it as a sign of status and therefore increasing their social capital. The more money you have, the more you can get other people to do stuff even without it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But same thing with social capital. If I'm just going around accruing all this stuff, everybody wants to help me, everybody likes me, everybody wants to do things for me, but I never like use that. I don't ask people for things. I don't allow people to help me or whatever. Then that kind of breaks and it becomes a problem. There's nothing wrong with making people happy. You just need to do that in balance with how much you allow or ask for, other people then doing things which help you too.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, no limitations to your love, right? Well, love is an abstract concept. I have my own definition of it, but I know what. So a lot of times there's language that people use in ways that they haven't explored like exactly what they mean, but they just learn a certain phrase or statement and abide by it. It becomes important for them. And love is one of those things where like, depending on who you are and how you're talking about it, things like love being unconditional or love being endless or love being more powerful than anything else, all that makes sense and has a place. But in real practical terms, no, there are limitations. I don't just mean in the sense of like a person's willingness to do something for you, but I mean like people are finite. So there's nothing about what a person can experience or conceptualize or do that isn't finite in some way. So if nothing else, I'll die and maybe I'll love you beyond death. I certainly like to think that that is the case, but that doesn't mean I can like show up and do stuff for you afterwards. Maybe you can. I don't know. I know people think about things in different ways. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there are limitations. Important to note also that in getting other people to do things, you need two things. One is they need to be willing to do it, like they have the intention of doing the thing. The other is they have to have the ability to do it. Right? Like I don't leave my children at home alone, even though I have every confidence that my 9-year-old really cares about keeping him and his brothers safe and everything. I don't trust that he has all the knowledge and ability to do that to the extent that I would want that to be the case.
Mm-hmm. Do you consider that parents usually don't take this into consideration when they're asking things for kids, and that raises frustration in the relationship, in the parent-child relationship?
Sorry, say that again.
Not being aware of the
I read a comment real quick and missed part of what you said.
no, I was thinking when you said about when you talked about having the ability. Do you think that sometimes the conflicts between parents and children come from the fact that the parent doesn't realize the ability of that child to do certain stuff?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that a lot of the problems experienced in any human dyadic relationship, two people, a lot of those problems, when it's a good relationship, when both people love and care about each other, a lot of the problems that happen are a result of people conflating willingness and ability.
Mm-hmm.
Why doesn't he do this thing? If he knows it's important to me, if he's not doing it, it means that he doesn't care about making me happy. It's not to say that like there's never issues with what someone's willingness or intentions are, But yeah, no, we get really. I think in terms of parenting, the one I see the most, and some of this has to do with the age of like the children, so like the ages of children and other parents I'm around a lot. The one that I see the most though is people who make mistakes like between a child's ability to like utilize language and a child's ability to take action based on verbal instruction.
Say more.
All right. If I were to say to you, like, hey, I need you to go run payroll, like, you know what those words mean. If I said, like, did you hear what I said? You could say, like, yep,
Yes,
you said
I
go
did.
run payroll.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that you have all the information then about what that means to put it into action?
Mm.
No. So there's processes between there. And what I see a lot of, this is pure like Brandon's observations and theories here. I think that as time goes on, we become more and more cognitively oriented
Mm-hmm.
collectively, which means we become more and more language oriented interpersonally. Children are becoming more and more precocious in terms of their ability to use language and think. As with anything, there's resources, right? If I spend a bunch of resources playing baseball, I can't spend those same resources playing basketball. As a result of playing baseball, I get more proficient at all the tasks associated with playing baseball, and I don't progress at all the tasks associated with playing basketball because I'm not doing it.
Correct.
Same with thinking versus action, right? The more that I think, if I'm spending resources on thinking, those are resources I can't also spend on taking action. And a very common mistake in our culture is that everybody thinks that thinking is action, or at least everyone thinks that certain kinds of thinking is the same as taking action. Like it's a thing I'm doing. What I'm saying here is I'm divided. It's not that it's not a thing that is happening. We need to divide between things which take place in cognition and things which take place in the real world, the world that is composed of matter and exists. It's not to say that thoughts and feelings don't matter. They obviously do, very important. But it's a different category than action, things that you do with your body. And because of how we moralize everything in our culture and justify everything, all that stuff gets really mixed up. And it sounds like if we're saying that thinking isn't the same thing as taking action, then that's like saying that thinking that your feelings don't matter, just what you do, which is not the case. But it's important to still be able to recognize they're the same in some ways. They're both important, or they're different in other ways.
Correct.
We know this is well documented, that children are getting smarter and smarter, as indicated by like the things that we collectively and culturally refer to as intelligence. In other words, the results that children get on IQ tests keep going up and up and up. Those tests have to be renormed every so often to bring them back down. There's a rule for this, and I can't remember the name of the person who calculated this out, but it's something like 8 IQ points every 10 years. That like, if we hadn't renormed, the average results of IQ tests right now would be a 108 instead of a 100 from 10 years ago, and then so on and so forth. Everybody knows this. We talk all the time about kids are so like anxious and depressed these days. Those are things that happen in the cognitive realm. That's a result. That's not happening because you pay attention to cognition, although I think there's a lot of causal chains there. But what I can definitively say is that if you are reporting depression or anxiety, you are definitely paying attention to what's happening in your cognition, because those are both things that happen in your cognition. Yeah, I hate to clarify this, but I know it's important. That doesn't mean that they're not real, or that they don't matter, or that they're not important. Getting in like the shadow because of the weird position of the sun is landing in a way that's making it all. Hopefully that passes as soon as the sun continues to. Probably because I'm wearing white sweater too.
You don't like Jesus now.
But nobody can like report that I'm feeling sad unless I've paid attention to my own emotions. Right?
Okay, yes.
Also, we are making things more comfortable physically for people as time goes on. Again, don't conflate this with me saying that things are more just or fair or equitable or whatever. I'm saying in terms of like comparing the average person's experience now to the average person's experience 100 years ago, like getting food and having comfortable clothing and temperature and chairs and whatever. Like, if I were to decorate my house only in furniture from 100 years ago, everyone would be like, wow, all your furniture is very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're freeing up resources, which we are deliberately doing, right? As a species, we're freeing up resources from these like base of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs tasks. We don't want to have to spend all our time worrying about starving to death. As we accomplish that, then we move on to the next thing and the next thing. That's another one of the misconceptions people have is if I solve all the problems, then I'll have no more problems. What actually happens for humans is when you solve the problems you're dealing with, you move on to the next problems. There are better problems to be stroked. It is better to be worried about whether you're popular or whether people hate you than to worry about whether you're going to die of starvation. That's a pretty, it's not to say that it's not a problem or that it doesn't matter. It's to say that if I could trade, if I can choose either, I can worry about starving because I don't have enough food or access to it, or I can worry about whether everyone hates me. They both suck. Subjectively, the experience of them isn't actually that different. I experience those both as though they are life or death problems.
Mm-hmm.
But one of those is a better problem to have than the other.
Right.
That's what we're talking about with the hierarchy of needs is as you move up each level, it's like this is a better problem. Not that it's not a problem, not that it's a less of a problem, that it's a better problem.
Correct, but you see, sometimes people take this into and transform it into okay, we should not help our kids that much, so they struggle a little bit more, and that way they don't get to this level of problem and stay
That
here.
reasoning is absurd, but the reason that it's used is not a problem. Or, all right, let me put a pin on the other thing first, which is just to say that children are getting better. On average, children are better and better at using language earlier and earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That often results, I see constantly someone talking to a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old and giving them instructions, and then the child not following those instructions, not taking the actions that those instructions are telling you to do. And then the person interpreting that as a lack of willingness. They don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great to do that. I also tell my kids things to do, but a very like simple parenting advice thing, especially with young kids, is give them verbal instructions. If they push back on those, then you can treat it as like a willingness issue and go that way. But if they don't push back on it, if they're just like, okay, or whatever, and then they don't do it, don't give them verbal instructions again and again. Don't try to amp up like, if you don't do this, you're going to be in trouble. You go over and you physically assist them in doing the task. And I know that that's frustrating again as a parent of 3 kids. Like, come here so I can put your socks on. Come here so I can I'm sitting down and I'm tired and I don't want to stand back up and have to go over to you to just come over here, right? But that's that you were asking about like the problems that arise. Like that's not likely to go well. Every parent knows that there are times where like you can say it all you want, you can threaten anything you want to threaten, you can offer any reward you want to offer. It's not happening. And I think a lot of that is just parents getting confused about like they know what I'm saying. But same as when we're talking about adults who are struggling with executive functioning,
Mm-hmm.
knowing what something is different from knowing how to do it.
Yes.
I just got to write this paper is different from here are the specific things that I need to do in order to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
I know I just got to clean up my house is different from knowing what specific actions to take that results in that. Very common thing I hear about all the time, especially because we do a lot of work with neurodivergents, is people who will be like, they call to their child, hey, so-and-so, and the child doesn't respond, doesn't look at you or stop what they're doing, whatever. And then you say something else, oh man, did you hear about whatever? And then they look up. And reasonably, understandably, people interpret that as like, oh, so they're just pretending not to hear me, which is, that happens sometimes. It's a real thing. We couldn't speculate that if we didn't all know that sometimes we did hear, but I'm not responding. But the vast majority of the time, like in my house, if my wife is calling me by name and I don't respond, by far most likely is that I did not hear and process that. Remember that it's different whether those sound waves reached my eardrums is different from whether it was acknowledged, got through attention into awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, huge problem is that people interpret whether or not other people are doing things or what things other people are doing as a result of what they intend or are willing to do, as opposed to like, no, they want to do the right thing. They just thought that what they were doing was the right thing, or they don't know what that means. And they're paralyzed by, oh, I don't know how to do that, but I don't want to say I don't know how to. That's part of the reason we focus so much on teaching people to just say, I don't know, and ask questions, because this happens for people themselves. It's like, I'm not doing that. And then I interpret that as a willingness issue. I'm not motivated enough. I just don't care enough. What's wrong with me? I'm lazy, whatever.
I'm lazy, yeah.
Instead of like, obviously I'm willing to, or I wouldn't be like feeling bad about the fact that I'm not doing it or intending to do it. Something else must be going on. That comes back to the conversation we put in a pin in earlier about resources and tools that are necessary to accomplish things. But I was trying to put the pin on that so that we can move on to your next question, which was parents saying like you got to let them fail, not help them. Okay.
I do not agree with that, but I want your,
Right.
your opinion.
The statement itself that you have to let your children fail is a ridiculous statement. It's an abstract statement and it's indefensible in its abstract form. Even if we were to say that there is something about, which I'm open to this, it can be discussed, it depends on what you mean by things. But even if we're going to say that there is something about the experience of failing that is inherently beneficial, regardless of what it is that you're failing at or the specific results of that failure, just attempting to accomplish something and failing at it is important to experience. That's an idea. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that. I'm just saying, if we say that it's good, that still does not mean that you have to let your children fail, because your children will have plenty of opportunities to fail when you can't stop them from failing. It's an absurd statement to be like, unless I actively choose to let my child fail and not help with them, they will never experience failure. Like, they're going to fail at all kinds of stuff all the time that you have no ability to help them to succeed at. In fact, if we look at like the number of things over the course of a person's life that your parents could help you to succeed with, if they don't help you, you'll fail at, that's a very small portion. Even when your kid is young, even when your kid is 3 years old, the majority of what they're doing through the day, just like moving from one spot to another, is not something that. So generally what I would say is like, take every opportunity you have to help them to accomplish things that they want to accomplish or get the outcomes that they want to get. Now, the thing that's tempered on that, wait, hold on. But you would do anything for your dad, right? Joke, but we can come back to that. Better, I can shove personal hunger. I can solve personal hunger faster than I can solve emotional hunger. The speed with which you can resolve a problem is not it's not relevant to what I'm referring to when I'm saying some better problems are better than others. Stakes, for example, like, yes, you can solve personal hunger, but we're talking about a scenario in which you can't, right? Like a person is starving because they don't have access to food. It's not something you can just necessarily resolve. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. You're talking about it from your perspective of like, no, I can get food. But that's the whole point. You're not actually worried about personal hunger like that because you can get food.
Yeah.
So the stakes of failing to solve the problem of I don't have enough food are much higher than the stakes of failing to solve the problem of I am not happy or whatever version of emotional hunger you're referring to. Meaning that you have a lot more time and opportunity to try and solve an emotional problem than a physical one. Because if you fail to solve it, you can try again tomorrow. If you fail to solve the physical one, you die. Okay, sorry. Back to love is not unlimited, or whatever. Depends on what you mean by love, whatever. This is very difficult for a lot of parents to reckon with. But like, no, I don't want to do anything for my child, and I am not willing to do literally anything for my child. Obviously, we can play that ridiculous game where I come up with absurd, extreme examples of things that you're not willing to kill one of your children for another one or whatever. But that's ridiculous. We don't have to go that far. Like, am I willing to stay up all night with one of my kids? Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't want to, but if it was really, really important, would for a night. And then like the second night, even if I was willing, I'm not able. Right? So again, this is people conflating willingness with ability. And so they're thinking of it as if I don't do something to help my child, that must mean that I am not willing to help my child.
Right.
There's a sense of this isn't all parents, but a lot, and as time goes on, it's becoming a larger and larger sector of parents. People who, especially the more successful people are in terms of like social markers of success, the more likely it is that you have learned things like willingness equals ability kind of thing, right? That if you want to do it, you can do it. You can accomplish it. You just got to want it hard enough, work hard enough, care.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then that means we evaluate ourselves through that lens. Like you said earlier, okay, my partner, I've said so many times that this thing is important to me and they didn't do it. I interpret that as they're not willing to, as opposed to like, no, they forgot or they interpreted what I said in a different way or whatever. I can do the same thing with my kids that we talked about, right? I asked him to come here so I could put on his socks, and he didn't come here. He just isn't willing to. But I do the same thing with myself.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pick up everything that, like I cleaned up their room and then they made another mess and I didn't clean it up that time. They need to learn to deal with the consequences, whatever. A lot of the time what's happening with this narrative is I think me not doing something that's to their benefit is bad. It means that I'm a bad parent for not being willing to do that thing. In order to deal with that, feeling bad about like, I should do this for them, I should take care of that for them. In order to deal with that guilt, one of the things I can do is to be like, no, actually, I am helping them by not doing that thing.
Mm.
Like, of course, I want to help my kid. And let's take an extreme example, but not an unrealistic one. This does happen. It's not super common, but it happens. That my kid has done something and has gotten arrested.
Okay.
And now I'm like, no, I'm going to leave them in jail overnight. They learn a lesson. If I just go bail them out right away, they don't learn anything from it. One of the things that comes from is the belief that like we learn through punishment and negative experiences. There's some truth to that, but also it's not at all what people actually think that it is. It's more just justified, like I'm angry and I don't want to help them out of this. Like they did a thing that I tried this, I tried that, they did this thing, and I don't want to help them. But that feels bad unless I can really justify it in like a way where I'm saying it to other people and everyone's like, you're right. That's bullcrap. You shouldn't, whatever. If it's like, they were out past curfew and whatever, then I'm like, no. A lot of other people would be like, go pick up your kid, man,
Yeah.
So then I got to go to this other justification of like, no, it's good for them to learn. Like, in fact, it often, and I would say pretty much always, but I can't prove that, is accompanied by a sense of superiority over other parents who would make the other decision. Like those other parents that just clean up after their kids' every mess. Yeah, that sounds nice. I also wish that my kid and I never were in fights and I solved every one of their problems. But that's actually bad for them. Those parents aren't willing to do what I'm willing to do of doing this difficult thing. Like parents take a lot of pride. In fact, a lot of what people mean when they refer to parenting is explicitly and only doing stuff that your kids don't like.
Correct.
Like if you don't punish your kids, you're not parenting.
They're not learning and they're not doing a good job.
But the reality is that we're humans, right? And there is truth to the idea that if we protect children from the consequences of their actions, this doesn't just go for kids, this goes for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
If we remove the consequences of an action, then the person will never learn how to deal with those consequences. And they're also very unlikely to learn that those consequences might happen as a result of those actions.
Right.
That's not inherently a bad thing, but it can cause problems. One of those things is if you talk to people a certain way or interact with people in a certain way, they get upset with you and they don't want to help you. If I go out of my way to make sure that no matter what, I'm always helping them, even if I'm upset with them or even if I'm tired or even if it's been too much or whatever, then that's not a bad thing, but it does mean that they don't have any, like in that specific experience, there's a time where if I'd gone the other way, they would have had an experience where they get a sense of like what limits are with people or how to detect like when you're upset or how they respond or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't. That doesn't mean they won't learn it in other scenarios to some extent or whatever. But yeah, I want my children, sure, in the abstract, I want my children to be happy and prepared to be successful in the wider world. I'll say that second piece that everybody thinks about all the time is also a ridiculous thing. The idea that your kids are going to go away from you when they're an adult and that you won't be able to help them anymore. That's a very, very new idea. That's not historically how, like, that's not how we've evolved to be like, once I come of age, my parents will be either unavailable to me or only like intermittently available to me in terms of helping and supporting me. That didn't happen 10,000 years ago. It didn't even really happen 100 years ago. It still doesn't really happen. Like, part of the reason that kids can move away from their parents when they become adults is because we have better abilities to travel and communicate over long distances. If we didn't have that, that still wouldn't be, like without phones and cars and stuff, your kids still wouldn't be moving far away from you. Still there. This is the most important thing in parenting. Whenever I'm doing work with parents, it's just to remind people, no matter what advice you get from anybody about anything, know that the most important thing, no exceptions, is the relationship you have with your child. If you are going to sacrifice that relationship, I can't imagine what, like, unless it's the difference between them dying or not, then there's nothing that's worth sacrificing that relationship. And people are sacrificing it for things like so their kids get A's instead of B's and stuff, which is just absurd. Like, the difference in a person's life, whether they got A's or B's or A's or C's or A's or D's even in high school, compared to the difference in a person's life when they have like a good connection to parents that they can rely on and communicate with and interact with over the course of their life, or don't. The grade difference is much less. It's not nothing. It's real. But especially when we're talking about B's or A's kind of stuff,
Yeah.
which is a lot of it. Like, the difference there is minuscule versus the difference between having a mom or a dad that whenever something happens, you can call them up and say, hey, this is what's going on with me. It would have broke you out. That's some reference to talking about going into jail.
Uh-uh.
So this is the workaround people come up with. They think it's bad for them to not help the kid. In order to feel not bad about that, they have to come up with an explanation of how not helping the kid is actually helping the kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost always is accompanied by a sense of superiority over people who would have decided differently. Because really what we're thinking when we're feeling bad about something or good about it, what we're doing is we're running little scenarios where, like, what would other people say or think about, or how would people generally, when I'm saying I think this is good, what I think is good is built on top of my understandings of what people generally, or certain people, weighted towards them, how they would think something is good or bad. And so there comes, if I'm feeling guilty, this applies to a lot of stuff, not just the specific thing. But if I'm a parent and I'm feeling guilty about the fact that I don't want to do this thing that would help my child, and then I'm like constructing a narrative where it's like, actually, no, it's important that I do this. It's even more helpful to them for me to not do the thing that would help them here. When I've done that, I'm doing that because I already have an idea that other people might think that what I'm not helping here is bad. That's why I'm coming up with the justification. So I have an awareness of other people who would be like, no, you're wrong and you should have helped. And so the narrative helps with that, but so does taking them down a peg. Yeah. Justifying my own position, but also attacking theirs. And this probably sounds to people like uncommon. I need the light to adjust somehow. It's bad timing. Here. But that's better. This might sound like it doesn't happen a lot, but I'll tell you right now, every single conversation you've ever heard anybody have about screens is this. 100%, no exceptions. You watch TV and people make comments about their kids being on screens and whatever. Like, talking about screen time as being a bad thing is entirely like, well, other people who would say that I should let them be on screens are bad and wrong.
Mhm.
Anybody who's like, no, yeah, we're getting our kid a cell phone, we don't have a problem with him playing video games or whatever, you're like, ooh, that's bad parenting.
Mhm.
It's not. I understand what people think that it is, but it's not. Which is not me saying that there's no downside to somebody.
You should not throw that out there without the whole hour to explain why you say that.
Oh, wait. I will sacrificially cause my child to suffer for their sake. They'll thank me in 25 years. It deeply pains me to hurt you, but just think in a few decades, maybe you can hurt your kids. Yeah, humorous way of phrasing it, but that's an actual thing, right? Like parents do think and even say, I know you don't like this right now, but someday you'll thank me.
You say, oh yeah.
Or just the general
Grow
idea
up
of
with
like,
that.
this helped build character.
Mm.
No pain, no gain, you know. A bit antiquated, but the phrase of like, it'll put hair on your chest, you know, stuff like that. The point is, we can't save our children from all suffering. The point is also that that's because that's not possible. That's not like bad that we don't do it.
Mhm.
Do I want my kids to suffer? Of course not. Do I think that any time that they suffer in any way, that's a failure of mine? No.
Mm.
And I do want to help do what I can to make it so that they get through suffering as well as possible, that it happens as infrequently as possible, that it resolves as quickly as possible when it does happen, that the intensity of the experience is as little as it can possibly be when it
I
happens.
guess people are talking a lot about the intensity. They're saying that they are getting used to the idea of the suffering, it will not feel so intense when they'll get it somewhere else, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But
It doesn't, it makes sense for a person to say that through the lens we're discussing, but the
Mhm.
statement itself makes no sense because I could also say like, well, my child might have their leg broken at some point in life,
I should
so I should break the leg
It's okay.
all the time so that,
Yeah.
or again, I know that sounds absurd and everyone's like, I would never do that. So then I have to use examples that I'm pretty sure everybody does to be like, this is you too. Very common one is, hey, it's summer and they've been sleeping any kind of schedule, whatever, but school's starting again in 3 weeks. It's time to start getting back on, going to bed early, waking up early. Is a version of like 3 weeks from now, they're going to have to sleep in ways that are less pleasant and, convenient and enjoyable for them. So let's start doing it 3 weeks early so that when it happens, it won't be as bad. It's the exact same thing. There's something coming up that they're not going to like. So let's do it before we actually have to do it so that the extent to which they don't like it is less.
Yeah.
I know everyone's like, no, that's different because your body adjusts and whatever, which there is some truth, not nearly as much as people think. There is some truth to like your body adjusting to a sleeping schedule and whatever. But that's irrelevant. Like it's going to be a difficult transition process. If what you're thinking is like starting school is such a difficult transition process that we can't also do the transition process of switching your sleeping schedule, then there's a real problem with how school is going. Like if that is so much that we can't also work on sleep stuff at the same time, there's other things we need to address. And I know this might sound irrelevant to people who haven't experienced it, but I'll tell you, working with kids and teenagers and families for a long time, yeah, like sleeping is a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what people make about grades or willingness or schoolwork or whatever is really about sleeping. A lot of what people make about depression or unwillingness or attitude or personality is really about sleeping. People just think it's this extraneous thing, like it shouldn't matter. They ignore like everything we know, both from personal experience, like lived experience, but also from the research data, that teenagers are not built to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's a really terrible way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We have reasons for it. I'm not saying let your kids sleep in until noon and miss half of their school every day or whatever. There's costs to that. But also to just think like this shouldn't be difficult. Like, no, it's going to be difficult. And honestly, switching your sleep schedule 3 weeks in advance it makes the transition, it just makes the transition happen earlier. But sleeping on a schedule that's not your regular schedule I try to teach people it's like a rubber band, that you can do things to change from your natural schedule to this one. And it's often important to do that. But no matter how long you hold it like that, that doesn't become your natural schedule. You just have to keep doing the things necessary to keep it stretched out.
Mhm.
And people think it's like, no, it'll be difficult, and then it's not a problem. We never got around to talking about systems and processes and stuff, but this is the same thing here where people misunderstand what that is. Mostly people are focused on automaticity, things happening without you having to consciously intend or choose to make them happen.
Mhm.
And everyone's chasing that, which is understandable and reasonable. And systems and habits, there are things that play into that, but everyone simplifies it down to like, if you do something enough times or think about it in the right way, then it will just automatically happen. That's not how it works. You can get there, but it's not just by like being intentional. Being intentional helps you get there, but not on its own. Anyway, I cannot remember a time in my life when I consistently got enough sleep. I don't think anybody does. There are some exceptions to that. But I don't know that I've ever met anyone where the exception is current, where they're like, right now I get enough sleep. Certainly I've heard people who are like, there was a time in my life, back when I was a kid or whatever, I got enough sleep. We were talking about the circadian rhythm earlier. Here's a thing that like some people talk about.
Just let me know that 10 minutes.
Over. Okay, we'll wrap up. Sleep issues is an epidemic. 100%. I would say that. I know there are people talking about that, but it is not talked about or thought of nearly as much as it should be. It is so dismissed. Like our culture is entirely comfortable with the idea that the way something is supposed to be for the average person, you wake up, you're miserably tired and in a bad mood or whatever until you drink your coffee and that gives you a little boost and now you can be a normal person. Which, like, I'm not saying that's a terrible thing or people shouldn't do that. I'm saying it's strange that that's like, yeah, that's what it is for everybody. There's no issue with that. Like, if you're waking up miserable and in a bad mood and whatever, there's not always a solution to that, right? There are real reasons that people need to wake up certain times or go to sleep certain times, whatever. But the fact that we think of that as like normal baseline, nobody's getting enough rest. It's not just sleep. Sleep is not the only version of rest. It's just the one that we're most aware of culturally and talk about the most. Nobody is getting enough rest. Again, go back in time 100 years. I know this is contrary to what everybody thinks, but really, go back in time 100 years, pick an average person, and then take an average person from today, just a random person, and compare the amount of productive stuff versus rest that they do in a day. And it's way more now. I know people don't talk about it like that, like, oh, back on the farm and whatever.
What do you mean? They were being more productive than people are right now.
Yeah, there's generally a sense that people used to work harder, which, for what it's worth, that has been around literally for as long as we have written records. Like some of the oldest written records are people being like, kids these days don't work hard. That's never changed. It doesn't actually mean it's true. People, for example, even if you look, this isn't to say that older systems are better. I wouldn't change, living right now for any period in history, especially the further back you go. There are problems, whatever. But these general ideas that we have that like people just worked all the time, like even in feudal Europe, we think of serfs as like constantly working, whatever, when a lot of labor was like seasonal based and whatever. There's months at a time where you're not doing a lot of productive stuff. A couple of days ago, here in Chicago, and a lot of people deal with this over the country, we had like sub-zero degree temperature. And I assume it was the same for your child. My kid's school was canceled. Yesterday, we had a bunch of snow, and we had like snow plows, whatever. Go back 100 years, when it's that cold, do you think everybody's like, well, we still got to go to work? No. When there's a foot of snow, they're like, okay, we got a snow plow. And, we think of like, oh, the snow blower is such a nice modern convenience, so much better than shoveling or whatever. Which is true, but it's also true that you go back far enough and what happened was they just didn't do that. Like you didn't have a driveway to shovel. You didn't need to get to work at 9 a.m. Like we have a lot of misconceptions that are based on general ideas about like kids these days don't work hard enough.
Yeah.
When you go home, do you not think about work?
Well, I cannot say to you that I'm not. You are, yeah.
I
Of
do.
course you are.
A lot of us are doing work
Mhm.
at any hour, checking and responding to messages, emails, and whatever. That's well known and well discussed. But let me do the flip side here. Do you think that like 200 years ago, people were like, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing in my free time right now. That's bad, and I should do something else instead? You think this is a human thing that whenever we're like, oh, this is really enjoyable and relaxing, oh, bad, I should be more productive?
I think we drove ourselves to think that way.
We are wrong about so many things. That's not to say that everything is bad or there's no benefits. But yeah, these ideas that like we are not as productive as people used to be. Here's what I will say confidently. We are much more cognitively oriented. As time goes on, we become more and more cognitively oriented. So the tasks that we're doing become more intellectual in nature and less physical in nature over time, on average. I have so many 8-hour nights, mostly 7-hour nights, but we know I'm not average. Well, that's great. Also, different things about what's average and how it benefits people. But we're doing more intellectual things than physical things. That has its upsides, obviously. Like I think most people in our culture would choose like if I can like sit down and talk to people and write stuff for 8 hours a day versus like go out into the cold and lift heavy things for 8 hours a day. Not everybody. Lots of people would prefer to do the physical over the intellectual, but I think over time there's more and more who prefer to do the intellectual. Partly because there's more value in that as time goes on. Like not as in like it's more valuable than physical labor, but as in like if I'm sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day, given all the tools and whatever at my disposal now, I can accomplish much more valuable things than I could do by sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day 60 years ago.
Correct.
But lots of stuff going into that. And that's a lot of what people then call hard work. And when we're saying like people used to work harder, we mean like they dealt with physical deprivation to a greater degree, which is again definitely true. Not desirable or admirable, though, right? That like your grandfather used to be starving half the time. You got to learn how to starve half the time too. Like, no, grandfather worked to make it so that things were better. I'm working to make it, which by the way is another part of what comes up with parenting kids. It's like, I do everything I can do to make your life better than mine. But sometimes if I'm tired or annoyed or whatever, for various reasons, there are times where each parent is then looking at their child and be like, they don't think of it or say it this way, but like, this is BS that you have it better than me.
Yes.
A lot of like, well, when I was a kid, I would have loved to whatever, but we had to what? Yeah, but we're doing that on purpose. Like we're deliberately trying to make it so they don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make us monsters for occasionally getting annoyed and resentful. Like, oh, you guys don't even know how good you have it.
Correct.
I know we need it. But I don't have an appointment at 2. I usually do on Mondays, but I'm not trying to keep you forever either. There's a sleep epidemic. More broadly than that, I would say there is a rest epidemic. People are not, I would divide it into 2 categories. I'd say rest and recuperation. Those are 2 different things. People don't do nearly as much of either of those things on average as is sustainable. This isn't about like what's nice or pleasant, although yes, it is. Living your life in a sustainable way is more pleasant than not because we're incentivized to do that. Like being tired sucks. I don't like it. But if it didn't suck, if my subjective experience of it did not suck, that doesn't mean that it's no longer a problem. It sucks because there's an underlying problem and we've evolved to have signals that call our attention to those problems. So overriding the signals by drinking a bunch of caffeine or whatever doesn't make the problem itself go away. How dare you have a better life when I work so hard to give you a better life? Yeah. So sustainability is about what is optimal, not just it's nice for me, which it's absurd that I even have to say that.
Yeah, I know.
That we
I
live
know.
in a culture where so many people would be like, well, it's not about what's nice for you, it's about what's good or important or whatever. As though those are separate things. But like, why do you think humans evolved to enjoy that if that was not a thing that was beneficial to humans? You think evolution works in that way where we're like, this is really bad for me, and so it feels really good, and I'm highly incentivized to do it. And this is really good for me, so it feels really bad, and I'm highly incentivized to avoid it. Like, no, that doesn't mean there's not exceptions. Obviously, there are, and part of what it is to be human is to be conscious and override those feelings, and not do things which feel good and do things which do feel bad. But by and large, no, like there's a reason that we're incentivized to do that. And yeah, honestly, by the time parents, especially that I've worked with, have children in high school, for the most part, it has been 20 years or more since those parents were in high school. Unless you work in the schools, I promise you, no matter how much you think you do, you have no understanding how different high school is from how it was 20 years ago. I know on the outside it seems more or less the same. It is not in any way the same. It is so much different.
Well, I see the difference between when I was in elementary, for example, in Romania, we're going up to 12. That was the schedule from 8 to 12. My daughter is going up 3:30.
I mean, again, this is what I'm about to say is not controversial, or maybe it is, but the information is not disputed. We know this. There's obviously a lot done to track different educational systems and how those performances result, or what performances result. And we all know, we talk about it all the time, that the US is not good in the education rankings by pretty much any metric. Of course, if you slice it down into smaller categories, then certain ones are doing better than others, obviously. And if you slice it down to certain slices, it's like, well, if you only count these kids, then we're doing great, which like, sure, but you're not counting that for other countries too, where you're narrowing it down to those slices. Our system is not as good as other systems by any metric. And I don't even like the testing metrics that we use. I'm not opposed to them. I understand why we use them. There are logistical barriers to how we can measure things. I don't think that's what's most important, but the things that are most important are very difficult to track in any kind of way where you can compare one to another. Whether it's important to compare is a different thing, but whatever. So I'm already talking about, we're using metrics like test performance and things like that that are optimized for what we culturally have said is the most important. This isn't some like woo-woo, we're talking about kids' happiness or whatever. We're talking about their performance on tests and their grades and whatever. And over again, we are terrible compared to other countries, especially compared to other countries if you count for like the amount of money that is dedicated to educating children and the results that you get. A very common thing that happens in therapy and in coaching is that a person has a problem. They come to a reasonable conclusion or analysis of what's happening and what they need to do in order to fix the problem. They do that thing. The problem is now worse. But they don't view it as what I did made the problem worse, because they still think, well, this was a thing that would help. I came to that conclusion already. So the fact that I'm doing it and the problem is worse means that the problem has gotten a lot worse. Even though I'm doing this good thing, that's not counteracting whatever's making this problem worse, and it's on balance worse than it was before. When what's actually happening is the thing that you're doing is making it worse. So very common that I do something that I think will help. It actually makes the problem worse. I experienced the problem being worse, but I don't think that that's what happened. So I try that thing harder.
Yeah.
Now the problem is worse. So I try it harder because it's even more important. That problem is worse. When we're talking about schooling, the American school system, I know this is very abstract and vague, and like there's a lot of conversations that we had about specifics, but the general sense is we're not doing well, so we got to get the kids to do more, and then we do more, and then we're doing worse, and we're like, oh crap, we're falling even further behind, we got to get them to do even more, and then we fall further behind because there are limits. No one, if instead of intellectual pursuits, if instead of academia and whatever, if we were talking about like how much weight can kids lift, if that's what we were pursuing with education, and what we're measuring is like, well, these kids can lift this much, these kids can lift this much, and and we were doing something and our kids can't lift as much as the kids from like 50 other countries who have fewer resources dedicated to this, people would not be like, well, we got to push them to lift heavier weights even faster. We'd be like, you know what? Maybe we're pushing them to lift weights that are too heavy too fast, and that's like injuring them and slowing them down. And the optimal balance is to pull back a bit. Over and over, you look at other countries that perform better, and they mostly fall in the one category, like you were just saying, which is countries where like there's way less academic demand, not necessarily less rigor, but less that's being put on a child's plate. Much more play, much more free time, etc. There are very few, in fact, as I'm aware, like we're talking about like 1 to 3 other countries that outperform us on things where they went the other direction and pushed their kids even harder. Those countries also have a lot of the same problems we see in our kids at much higher rates, like much higher rates of child and teen suicide and stuff. And yes, you can get people to do stuff if you beat them. I know we're talking metaphorically here, but if you make people feel bad enough, you can get them to do stuff. That doesn't mean that you get a good outcome at the end.
Yeah. We had that saying, I think I told you about the donkey, that my donkey died right when I teach him not to eat anymore. Taking them to the extreme, and then.
That's a good saying. Yeah. You know this, and I'm sure I've said it. One of my favorite questions to ask people is, how's that been working?
Correct.
Like they come in with these ideas of like, I just need this, wake up earlier. How's that been working? Well, I haven't been. Right? How's it been working that you think that that's the solution? Nothing's been happening. Right. So even if you're theoretically correct, it's not useful. Let's move on to something. We should test happiness. I would have flunked happiness class in high school. Actually, I could probably write a good essay on what would theoretically lead to more happiness. But if we had a practicum and they tested happiness levels, that I would flunk. You have to get going, right?
Yeah.
We need to wrap up. Otherwise, I have a lot to talk about with that. We'll be back. Well, I'll be back same time next week. I think Margaret probably will be back, but maybe on this again. We'll see.
Yes.
Thank you all. It's good to be with you.
Thank you.